My name's Stuart. The following is an interview with artists Luis Antonio, Orsi Spaniol, and Eric A. Anderson about a video game they recently finished working on called The Witness. Due to the nature of this game, The Witness, there's a lot of conversations that we did have about the game that involve spoilers for particular parts. We didn't want to not have those conversations because, as it turns out, the work they did had a lot of interesting stuff to say about things that were spoiler related. So the way this interview is structured is that the first half is non-spoiler related. It's safe for anyone to listen to if they haven't played the game. However, when we get to a part where we are going to talk about an idea or part of the game that could spoil it if you aren't aware of what it is, we'll briefly describe what it is and then bring up an annotation. So if what we're talking about is something that you're unfamiliar with or don't want to have spoiled for yourself, you can click the annotation to skip ahead. So hopefully, if you have played the game, you'll get the most out of this interview because you can listen to everything. If there are things that you're unfamiliar with when we describe it, please just click the annotation link and it'll skip you on ahead. Okay, thanks, and hope you enjoy. Trying out noise gating for the first time, so we'll see how that works.
Okay.
All right. I didn't have a title for this either, so I'll just say, I guess, welcome. This is an interview podcast with the art team who worked on The Witness. Eric Anderson,
Yay.
Orsi Spanioli, and Luis Antonio.
Close
Hello.
enough.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I don't actually know how to pronounce your surname.
You got mine just right.
Could you please,
America.
yeah. Could you please correct me on that, Orsi?
It's Orsi Spaniol.
Orsi Spaniol?
Yes.
Okay. You paused, it's like close enough. Okay, so you guys just recently finished a really big project.
Yeah.
Yay!
Hey, how long was
Hooray.
it for each of you?
I think it
I was on it for 4.5.
Yeah, go on, Archie. Sorry.
Huh? Oh, I said 4.5 years is how long it's been.
Yeah, I was for
Yeah, I
4
was-
years. I joined a bit after.
I think I was the first one of the three of us on the project, and I was on for 3 years, and then I went off to work on a different project. So
Yeah, that was that Mist follow-up?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
follow-up.
spent all day fixing bugs. Yep,
Oh geez. Wow.
we're right in the thick of things right now. So
Oh no, so you've gone from like heavy production to heavy production.
I went from heavy but like relaxed production to heavy but intense, stressful production. So
Okay,
yeah,
that's
the Witness was a big project, but it was actually pretty chill most of the time.
that's interesting. We'll get to that in a minute. I think to step back, I'd like to sort of ask you guys, because this is both a discussion of The Witness, but also sort of a discussion of what it's like being an artist in the game industry and working on a project like this. Sort of what got you into art or the particular art craft that you guys specialize in, 3D modeling and texturing. How did you find yourself where you are today?
Who wants to go first?
You can go ahead.
You want make the old guy go first? All right. I went to art school back in the previous century, and my first game job was actually at Cyan, the people who did Myst and Riven. So I was hired to work on Uru, Ages Beyond Myst, which was sort of the Myst online MMO game that they were working on at the time. Worked on that for 3 years. After that, we did Myst 5, which was a year and change. And then we were trying to land other projects. And right around 2009, things were getting kind of sparse for me work-wise. And I had been contacted by Jonathan Blow a couple years previously. He had just shipped Braid and was working on a new thing and was interested in trying to find environment artists. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm not really doing a whole lot right now. And he said, interesting. And I was working on The Witness about 2 weeks after that. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Were you when you came on the only artist on the project?
No, there had been
else?
there had been one artist prior to me who had worked on it from sort of the very beginning, doing the rough artwork and blocking in the areas, and then I was the second one to start. So,
Okay, cool.
I can go. So I studied in Portugal, art school, and then I moved to London. I wanted to work in games or in movies. I didn't know very well yet. I got an offer from Rockstar Games. I worked there for 3 years. I did Manhunt 2, Max Payne 3, Midnight Club LA, the PSP version. Then halfway through Max Payne, I left. I wasn't really enjoying the experience anymore. I moved to Canada, to Quebec, where I worked for 3 years at Ubisoft. I was lead artist on some crappy games you haven't heard about, like Power Up Heroes and Dance on Broadway. And then I was then I was an art director in a couple of other games that never came out. And here I was totally fed up of AAA games, and then I had the opportunity. Actually, I was supposed to work with Chris on Spy Party. I was going to do the characters for the game.
Oh, wow.
And we were talking about it back and forth. Like, I was really bored. I was doing stuff on my free time, and I started to do, like, showing him how his characters could look like. We started to talk about it. Then I said, look, I'm leaving Ubisoft. I can't stand being here anymore. So if you want to work with me, now is the time. But he said it's too early. But I have a friend who's working on another game, so you could join him for maybe like 6 months. And when he's done, you join me on Spy Party. So that's how I met Jonathan, and the 6 months became 4 years.
Oh, wow.
I got the same 6-month pitch when I started. It was going to be 6 months, and that was it. Yeah.
So that blocked
I was
out
going to
Island.
have a contract for 6 months at first.
Yeah, like, I remember playing the game, and it was like, look, this is almost finished, right? You guys just have to clean this up and improve stuff. Yeah.
And that was what, 2011, 2010?
2011, yeah.
20, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Cool.
Yeah. So I don't know, I started out, like, as a kid I was always drawing and painting, but I was kind of like the lame kid who didn't actually know about video games until later. And, my first game wasn't like Mario or something. It was Final Fantasy X and Ico, and it kind of, whoa, you can do so much with this medium. Because at the time I was into, like a little bit of writing, like anything creative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I swore to myself that I would go to school for, some sort of game-related thing, and I did. I went to Ringling College of Art and Design. And I majored in game art and design, and then I just sort of moved to San Francisco, hoping to get a job. And then I applied to hundreds of companies, and Jonathan was one of the few people who...
Hello?
Hello? Sorry,
Uh-oh.
Orsi, I think you might have dropped out.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can you hear us?
Oh, you're back.
Yay.
Yeah.
I can hear you. Damn it! I was just rambling on.
Sorry.
Anyway.
You just mentioned that you'd sent out hundreds of applications, and one of them was to Jonathan Blow.
Yes, and he was, kind of the person who was like, come check out the game, we'll see what you can do on it, and eventually, like, at first it was supposed to be just a very small little contract job, and I was the person who little interesting things to have in the environment, but slowly I kind of took on more and more, so I ended up having a lot of areas in the island.
Yeah, cool.
Yay.
Yay. And we'll get to it later, but you also designed an entire section of puzzles.
Yes, that was amazing.
Yes. So, but before we get into talking about that sort of stuff, I wanted to ask sort of how the workflow and organization of this project went, because as saying before, this is a long project with a very small team of artists. So how did you divide work on the island and manage the workflow of producing things?
Before Louise, honestly, we didn't even have organization.
So I guess, yeah, I was like, so my background, I'm like, I think I'm over organized, and I think the project was under organized. So I like the first thing I did was a map of the island. I set up a wiki, tried to get an art meeting going on regularly,
He tried to
and
get
one
us to use some terrible software there for a while too, like organizational software.
yeah, like because I was used to big studios where every like there's a producer, everyone is accountable for, and I realized like I think the issue was things were very disorganized. I think on the art before, and it was hard to like we didn't know how much work we needed to do. Like Jonathan would say, we should be done in 6 months, but you didn't really know what's the amount of work. And we were four artists at this moment, and who would do what. So I just tried to lay that groundwork, and once I think that was there, we all had something in common to go from.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. The game is basically one big space. So was that ever a problem or challenge of someone working on one thing and that like creating errors in a space that someone else was working on? Like how did work that one person do fit into somebody else's?
So Jonathan actually, like the engine, I don't know if you know, but the engine that the Witness is built on is actually an extension of the Braid engine. It's literally the same engine.
Huh.
Just worked on it for many years. And that was actually one of the things that he and the other programmers tackled very early on. Because it's an open world and there is no level streaming, there's not levels, the entire engine is broken down into very, very small bits of data, essentially. Every object in the game is a separate chunk of data, and every bit of terrain is broken out into separate chunks. And so from the very beginning, it was set up so that people could be working alongside each other and not sort of stepping on each other's toes. And it's actually the most... I don't know what the word to use is. It's the most interleaved engine I've ever worked with in terms of how it's broken out and how it's organized.
Oh yeah, it was like there weren't even issues. Like I was like, I'm sure we're gonna have the usual issues, but they didn't even happen. I don't understand quite how
Ever?
that was possible.
Not ever?
Like
Once
like
in a
for
while.
example,
Once in a while.
we would but there was a number of like you would be assigned an X number of slots to build entities, and if you went over those, you would override other people's entities. So that happened a couple of times, and I was also remembering.
From a technical point of view, we did have a bunch of times when we broke each other's things just because the island itself is so intricate.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
I was
if
just
one of us
remembering.
moved free at one point of the island, it could break something for somebody else.
Like it started very organic. Like I remember because I think we split each artist into like I remember I was gonna take over buildings, Eric started to take over rocks, and Orsi vegetation, and I think we took areas that were like I remember taking the buildings first, and Eric was solving the cliffs, and then we naturally figured out okay these are actually areas. It doesn't make sense that we split the work this way, and then the areas were so distinct that it's like even at the start we wouldn't even do the same textures. Like if someone was working like Eric was on the desert, I would be on the entry yard or something, and we were just discovering things on how to solve the island in very separate ways. Or actually when she started doing the trees, it was just she would be focused on an area with a lot of vegetation while a building had none, so it was okay.
Yeah,
But eventually it all became very intertwined, and
Yeah.
we all started having like, okay, in this area I'm working on these specific things and you're working on those specific things. But because we're such a small group, it was never a problem because we could just talk to each other and everybody knew what the other person was working on all the time.
Yeah. You got to a point like Eric made a set of rocks that are like probably the most used rocks in the game ever. And yeah.
Yeah, we
would
would
just
start to share. Yeah, we'd start to share assets. So, like, I would make some rocks, or she would make some vegetation, and you know that was our library. And you would just start picking from the sort of the successful examples of each category, and that just got propagated all over the island.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. You were bringing up the engine before. That's an interesting question I have about 3D because I like a small background in art, but that's in 2D, and I'm sort of interested working in 3D. and in particular a game how the sort of structure of an engine, the way that particular thing like renders images, like how that sort of affects the sort of art that you make for it. So what were the sort of characteristics of the Witness's engine that sort of influenced the style of art that you made? Like how did the engine affect art decisions?
I actually would say it went the other way around. I don't know if you guys would agree.
I don't think so. Like when we joined, Ignacio had already created a light mapper, right? They knew it would be a game reliant, like it would be daytime. It would be heavily based on realistic lighting and light maps.
Yeah, I guess what I mean is, I feel like the design of the game was or the visual design was dictated not by the engine, but actually by the game design, and then the engine was built to facilitate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, like like there were only tools to do exactly what needed to be done. Like there was nothing else, and I think that was very impressive. So it seems like
so it's very lean.
Super lean.
Very, very lean.
When we started to work, for example, in 3D, like we didn't even have an axis because Jonathan didn't use an axis to move an object. It was all like you had to move the camera and kind of see where it was. So if we wanted an axis, we had to ask for the programmers to write one. So a lot of the tools were built based on the way we work.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I had read a bit of what Eric wrote about designing the rocks. That point you brought up about how there was a very particular lighting engine built before art was really discussed. That was one thing from what you were talking about, Eric, that did sort of influence the design of rocks was the way that the engine sort of rendered lighting. That had very
absolutely. Yeah, I know Jonathan very early on, he wanted light and the way light plays off of surfaces to be as physically accurate as possible, yet to stylize everything in such a way. And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say probably the number one overriding guideline that we were given was that we wanted to strip away unnecessary noise from the visuals.
So that was a design consideration from the start? That wasn't like something you had to discover?
Yeah,
I think that we were told that fairly early on, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think because the thing is, when we joined and we thought the game would be done in 6 months.
In 6 months.
There was already a certain style going on, but I don't think it was a controlled style. It was just the result of however the game grew up to that point. And I don't know. I guess
focused for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know because it had a lot of noise. I think Jonathan had one. Like I think he didn't want any excess information that is not required. But I don't know. I feel we defined some of that when we start to look at how to solve certain things. Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint.
Yeah,
because I remember I don't know if you knew there was a bunker when the game started. Like at the original version, there was a bunker where you started, and someone lived in that bunker, and there were tons of. You're supposed to be a house, and I was doing a lot of objects for the house, and I remember doing a lot of furniture and props, and Jonathan realizing that he didn't want those props. Like, I guess he didn't know exactly yet what it meant not to have too much noise.
Yeah,
he knew. Yeah, he started to realize it was not too many objects, not too many noise on the textures. I guess I don't know. Yeah, kind of like that.
No, you're right, because we did sort of evolve the look from a point of. And I think the post that you're referencing, I mentioned that early on. I think we started using what most people would consider like traditional 3D art techniques, right? Where you throw normal maps on things,
like
make it gritty.
Like the Glass Factory, like I was doing an object and I was doing the classical high resolution thing, and then that's I think the more assets we did, or Eric had a lot of really detailed vegetation, and then we were like, okay, we
mention even fairly late in the development, while we still had the landscape architects, it still wasn't very clear, even just we have a lot of noise in the plants, are we going to get something that has a lot of flowers and greenery?
And I think that's when we were like, yeah, I think that's when we all asked ourselves, okay, this is not gonna work this way. So we all stopped and asked Jonathan, look, we need to figure out how the game is gonna look. And then we took a clear step back and we all spent, I don't know, like 2-3 months, maybe 2 months, maybe just, going back to the beginning, looking at references, mood boards, how could the game look like, and figure all the art direction, like from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a very striking style. It's interesting because on the one hand, there's very sort of it is about sort of phenomena in the real world, and everything has a sort of grounded, realistic feel to it, especially with the collaboration with the architects that we'll get to. But then also, it feels like this very sort of strangely fictional place, and that the sun never moves, and the colors and sort of geometry are all obviously not real. So it's got this like weird, half real, half unreal feeling to it. It's very, very interesting. It works. I think it's very, very effective. Yeah.
I mean, everything definitely has a reason behind it. So it was definitely a result of things that we wanted out of the game.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually something I'm happy about. Like we didn't, like a lot of games, you're like, you look at an image, you find it really cool, and then you try to go with that style. And I think most of our choices were based on, like there was a why for almost, I think everything we did, like, and it ended up looking like this because it was the best way it could look to do what it was supposed to do.
Yeah. We're mentioning the vegetation a moment ago. Trees and sort of vegetation strike me as something that's very difficult to do believably in 3D. Like what were some of the challenges of getting trees and shrubs to look good and fit into the style?
In the beginning, when we were starting out, the original artist who was doing these kinds of things definitely had a very kind of basic way, like if you think about a tree, it was more of how a 5-year-old would draw a tree, straight trunk, and then some vegetation on top. So we were trying to think of, okay, how, the landscape architects have all these cool ideas for what kinds of vegetation we have and everything. We had to look at a lot of references and be like, okay, what is it that makes this kind of tree special? And try to capture that. And like originally there was a birch forest right around the beginning.
Oh, I think you might have
Hello, I
dropped
think
out.
we lost Orsi.
Can you hear us?
Apparently is not very good. Hello?
Hello. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, you're back.
We can hear you.
Sorry.
You were just mentioning the birch forest and suggestions that the architects had for that. Hello?
Orsi?
Uh-oh.
Hello.
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I picked up my computer. I don't know if that will help. But
Hold
yeah,
it
so
to
we
the
were
south.
just trying to...
Oh, no, sorry, nothing.
Okay. So we would just have to capture, the actual essence of the kinds of plants, and birches have in kind of, lots of parallaxing little trunks, and we were trying to get a lot of that with, I was trying to do the autumn forest with very sparse leaves, feeling very airy and nice and golden, and it was all very just trying to capture the best out of things. And
I think a bit before that, like, there was a moment, like, after those trees that look like 5-year-old trees, we did I remember, like, trying to learn how trees are built, like, to really look, because I think games naturally have an interpretation of trees rather than the real ones. And, like, I remember conversations with the landscape architects about how a tree has a trunk, and that trunk, divides in two, but there's always one of them that's the main trunk, which then breaks in two, and then so on. and really understand the anatomy of a tree and when it's young, when it's old, and I think once we understood this, like we really understood how a tree grows and evolves, and like I remember even conversations about the way a tree is built so that there's shade, so that there's a maximum usage of leaves to get light. And I think once we knew this, then we were comfortable to start simplifying and letting it go, and Orsi do the awesome vegetation that you do.
Yeah, because I remember early on with the vegetation, Luis and I were doing tree tests, and at least I know in my case, I was trying to replicate, as much detail as we could and still keep it stylized, and it was frustrating because trees are very, very complicated.
Yeah.
And then Orsi comes in and basically like simplifies the crap out of these things so that they're just an expression of a tree, but you could identify different species, right? She captured the essence of the different types of trees, and that was when it was like, okay, I think we got this. I think Orsi figured it out.
Yeah, I think it was the leaves. Yeah, Orsi knew, like you managed to really get the leaves to still be expressive, but not like, I don't know, you just got it, yeah. Exactly the right amount of detail.
Yeah.
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 For everything. So it wasn't just the vegetation. We had to do the same about like why are rocks arranged the way they are, and why is architecture working the way it is, and what parts is it made out of, and like really understanding the reasons behind everything was the reason that everything turned out feeling so grounded.
Yeah, everything was so heavily referenced and researched and made sure we were doing it for the right reasons and not just because it was like cool looking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that experience of collaborating with architects. So, were there specific reasons or ideas of why Jonathan wanted to collaborate with architects? Like, why was that decision made?
So he started with David Ellman, the guy who did the art for Braid.
Oh yeah,
doing concepts for The Witness, and you might see them in the game.
in a particular section, maybe.
But they were very whimsical, right?
Yeah.
They were very much in the style of Braid's, sort of like lighthearted.
Yeah.
Like optimistic.
It's. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I mean. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say whimsical in the sense of they were evocative, but I don't think they were heavily researched. They weren't based on real world architecture.
Yeah, like storybook.
Right.
I think he realized, like, this is so long ago, but I think that it was more like he realized that if everything else in the game is so not grounded, like there's the panels and the way how small Disneyland style the world is, everything else needs to be very solid to support the concepts. And, like if you need buildings, you get architects, and if you need landscape, you get landscape architects.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, yeah, that's it. Like, yeah.
I was going to say, and I think we've talked a little bit about this in other write-ups and things, but at first it was actually not all smooth sailing. I mean, it was a really good experience, but I think the architects were coming at it from a very practical, real-world application sort of perspective, and they didn't know what the implications of producing usable game art were. And so I know we had a couple of situations where they would propose something and we would be like, oh, how the heck are we going to do that? How are we going to execute that in a way that'll work for the game? And I think over time we started to really get good at communicating with each other about the limitations or the drawbacks or the benefits of different techniques.
Yeah. And they would do a lot of detail that you need to build a building, but you don't see half of that in game, and a lot of time would get wasted doing this. And yeah, once we figured the workflow, the same with the landscape architects. That one, I think it was even harder with the landscape architects to find a good workflow with the vignetting and the framing. And like I remember the entry yard was reworked like a million times until
They had a very difficult time with the whole no thing because they constantly were trying to create a lot of texture.
Ah, yes.
And we had to kind of, cut back on it and saying, okay, we can't have, like, texture for us just means noise. We have
Oh,
cut out. Yeah,
do
or
you-
or they
Actually,
would come in. Oh, no. I was trying to pick up when you cut out. That they would come at us with very specific requirements for say species of plants, right? Like these are 4 different types of green vining style plants for the entry yard, and we would have to explain like, well, in our art style, like we only have so much leeway. I don't know that we're going to have 4 or 5 distinct plants that all are sort of in the same
yeah.
subspecies or whatever. And eventually we arrived at a spot where I think we understood that. But there was a while where we struggled really hard to try to be more.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is.
economical?
I think it's more
Yeah.
like compatible, maybe.
Yeah, I mean they wanted this very specific type of ficus plant or something, and we would bend over backwards trying to replicate that, only to realize that in doing so we put way too much noise into it, and really it should just be a splotch of green stems. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. But I think
we
it was
learned to
also,
pull back.
it was also like they would always give us, like, for example, a top-down view of how the planting would be. Like near the path, you're going to have these plants, then a bit further away, you have these ones. And we would do this, but then when you walk, it would just look ugly. And then we changed the process to more, they would take screenshots walking through a region, and we would talk about the feelings that the plants should give you, or the framing, like, like I want to look left and I want to see this and not see this, so maybe you could put some trees, or it became more expressive than a technical gardening kind of
And
layout.
eventually it to just having them explain how plants grow and what kind of plants would grow in this climate, and then having us kind of figure out how we're going to do it, because, once we understood why things are the way they are, it was easier for us to just make what we needed.
Yeah.
And eventually they kind of dropped to the background and were just giving us suggestions and tips.
Yeah, they became
Yeah.
useful in stuff like, I remember the river, like understanding how a river is, and the way the soil is around the river, and the way the ground, like the mountain, how it used to be a volcano, and how the ground would be around. Like those things would be hard for us to, I think, research and arrive at the conclusions. Like you could, like I remember with the forest, like I was working on the forest, and they would tell me, look, I don't know, these plants would not work here because there's no light or there's no something. Yeah, that would be really hard to arrive at that conclusion
Yeah,
by myself
actually,
doing online research.
that whole approach of like giving us the knowledge and then letting us sort of deploy that knowledge on our own, that sort of metaphorically, I think, is the same thing that happened with the game design itself, right? I think early on we weren't really sure what the prime directives were of the game, and I think the more we worked with Jonathan and tried to learn sort of what his motivation was and what his objectives were, that's when we really started getting more successful, because we could do our own puzzles, right? Or we could come up with our own ways to enhance the gameplay. And I think that's the reason that it turned out the way it did, is because he trusted us, and the architects trusted us, and the landscape designers trusted us to sort of take the education that we were given and use it smartly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It turned
because
out great for us because we got to learn a lot of different things.
Oh yeah.
yeah,
it's true.
and now that's like something that you'll carry with you for new projects you work on. Really.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Cool. I was gonna ask about that because what you were saying about how going through that process of learning how to make sense of the world and how it's put together, feeling like that sort of led you to understand more about the sort of design ideas that John was going for. That definitely feels like something in the game. The more I was playing, it felt like part of the reason there was such attention given to the art was because the game was like, about looking at the world and really observing and understanding it carefully. And so it made sense as to why there was so much care put into the art process. Because
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But like honestly, like all games should put that level of attention. Like
think
maybe
so?
this one, yeah, like maybe not. I think in this case there were reasons why it was like this, but a lot of games a lot of art is just turn off and you're just building the world. You don't pay that much attention, and that's why I was always leaving other companies. And maybe this game is like an extreme of this, but I think we should do this a lot more in other projects in general.
I totally agree. This project changed the way that I look at game development as a whole. I think it's a healthier way to develop games, and it makes for better products at the end.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I was thinking maybe we should work into talking about some stuff that would be spoilers. And so the way I'm thinking of doing this is we'll sort of describe a particular thing we're going to talk about, and then if the person listening aren't familiar with this part of the game, then we'll have a link that you can click on and you can skip ahead. So I want to ask Orsi, Orsi about. I'm so sorry. About the set of puzzles that you designed. So like how you came to come up with those ideas and the process of making them what they are and putting them in the game.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume you're talking about the Pine Forest logging area related puzzles, just for people who are listening in case they haven't played that part yet.
Yes.
So that area was not even really an area. There
Hey.
were very.
Okay, sorry. So, just
This is going to be difficult.
so just go back to the part where you're saying at that previous point in development, it wasn't even really an area. It was just like a between point.
Yes, there were 3 puzzles that John mocked up, and they were just going to be in a little platform. And, I was going to make the trees for
I'll jump in while she cut out for a second. I was going to say the logging structure that we had was there, and I believe the Pine Forest was really just there to be a story point for why there was a lumber mill.
Actually, there was at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when we started out, that whole area was just dead ground with nothing on it. So the whole Pine Forest thing was just kind of me saying, well, these trees that you mocked up kind of look like pines. Let's just go with that, and it'll be easy to make more branchy kinds of things. So then I kind of asked John, can I please maybe explore this more, because there's a lot of cool things we could do with shadows. And he said, fine, and I mocked up a bunch of puzzles.
I remember you did tons of variations. They were floating in rows.
Yeah. And we looked at it with John and, talked about what was good and what wasn't good in each one and narrowed it down and refined all of them. And then I kind of had to lay them all out in the environment and work with the architects to come up with what a roof that would give the right angles for these shadows. And it was all very, every time I moved the tree, it get broken. So it was very intricate.
Yeah.
It was definitely a lot easier to design those kinds of puzzles because I was an artist. And I also designed a few other ones in other areas that,
Yeah, could you tell us what parts of the island those were?
I think it got off.
So the ones on the inside of the monastery, like around the red tree. Those, yeah. So before then, the monastery was also not a laser area at all. But because I added those puzzles, there was kind of enough things there to turn that into a whole place. And I also designed the middle one on the outside for that, just because it was very dependent on the screen, like what, the little cutout wooden screen.
Yeah, that aligning with the panel.
Spoilers.
Well,
But
yeah.
And I also did a few in the hub village area with some, there's like a triple solution one that involved a lot of that kind of stuff. And like a wiry shadow one and all that. So I don't want to go too much into it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's assuming the person listening to this is like, oh yeah, I've played these areas, then I think it's a fair game to talk about. Did you have any situations where you like came up with an idea, then implemented it in the game, and that like gave you more ideas, or sort of changed your understanding of the idea?
I think that happened more with other kinds of puzzles that we're not talking about yet.
Okay. Yes, I can imagine
Spoilers.
that. But like, okay, so here's a spoiler-specific example. So there's one of the shadow puzzles where the previous sequence is about sort of negative space made by a shadow and how that can sort of shape a possible line. And then one of them is on a rock, and because it's a curved surface, the shadow stretches over it, and so you have to like interpret. Okay, like, is this meant to read as one square or two? I like have to think about the fact that this shadow is being stretched over where it's being displayed. Like, did stuff like that come out of trying ideas, or did you sort of think of that as like, oh, this is something that would happen because it's a shadow?
Yeah, that was giant rows of floating puzzles in the sky that I was just trying to do. Like, how does shadow look in this situation? It's cast differently. Like, what if parts of it was cast in the foreground, but then a part of it was removed a little bit, and it would look like it's not quite lined up, and you would have to line it up yourself, and kinds of thing. It was all about playing around, and that's why I think that those kinds of puzzles wouldn't really have existed if it wasn't an artist making them. Is because it was a lot of different, like a lot of playing around with 3D objects in space. And
yeah, did that challenge come up with other areas in the game, things that were puzzles designed by John, but clearly you like. So just talking about panel puzzles for the time being, like situations where he like needed to talk to and collaborate with you guys to sort of understand how something could look and how that would affect a puzzle.
I can't think of a specific example, but I'm sure it happened.
I think there was like, so I was responsible for the panels themselves, and there were some like the colored lights, for example. He knew that he wanted the back of the panels not to be a panel, but to be like something that's painted. So it was a back and forth to figure out how is it going to look, so you can understand that it's not a illuminating surface. So I think that kind of issue that was back and forth, but I think he had most of this stuff figured out. Like he knew what he wanted to be.
In the case of that building, like I remember from very early on, he had the whole thing mocked up. It was just very, very ugly, but the functionality was all 100% there.
Yeah.
Interesting. So now we're going to talk about the obelisks. We just kind of sectioned out, so bear with us. We're going to talk about the obelisks and how they relate to the game. So if you know what we're talking about, you can. If not, we've got an annotation link here, and you can click on that to skip. So, in the world, at some point, maybe, you figure out that there are, as you were seeing on the panels, these lines with a starting point and an end point that are embedded within the world itself, and you can actually trace along these in interact mode and complete a puzzle. So that, as I understand it from like interviews I'd heard, was the sort of original idea of the game. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure if that's true or not.
definitely think that it was always meant to be a part of it.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it was always meant to be one of the big special things about it. But
Like, I think the idea was
puzzles
always that.
themselves were always meant to be the meat of the game also. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they like from obviously I've only completed a subset of those because by their nature there's probably a lot there that I just have not seen yet, or
And there's a couple.
there's probably some that I will never see. But immediately when finding them, I was struck by how challenging they'd be to like conceive in abstract without modeling them, without sort of working in the space and sort of knowing how things look. So what was that collaboration process like of designing those with John and putting them in the world?
it was very mixed.
Oh, go ahead.
Sometimes he had an idea and we would try to make it work with the environment. Sometimes we had an environment and we saw opportunities within it. So it was a very
Oh, she cut out again.
It was very
I'll pick up where she was talking. John had several of them mapped out from very early on, and I would say that those were actually the most challenging because sometimes
Yeah.
the idea that he had in his head wasn't necessarily compatible with the realities of the art that we were producing, and so I can remember. Oh, there were some puzzles that we must have tried 3 or 4 or 5 times before we finally abandoned entirely. There was one at one point inside the monastery. I'm not even sure if that survived, but I remember Orsi and I tried many times to mock up a puzzle that was inside there, but the lighting was so dramatic in there that you
I
couldn't
remember
get.
that.
Yeah, you couldn't get a consistent line color throughout the length of the puzzle because the lighting kept going into shadow or the sunlight wouldn't get where you needed it to be, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And I think we aborted that one if I remember correctly.
we changed it a little bit.
Changed it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Where I was going to say in the cases where we sort of responded more organically to the art that we were building in sort of midstream, those were the more successful ones because we could push the art this way or that way to sort of accommodate the puzzles, and it was much more flexible.
Yeah, like I remember, like he had a couple of. I think he had the core ones for each area or for each theme.
Sure.
And I think the hardest was like he had the programming ready for these to work, and we started by implementing them. And I don't know if it's because he saw how good Orsi was designing puzzles, but there was a clear moment where he said, "Guys, go to the world and find them. Find situations where they could work." And I think that's when it really grew into.
Yeah.
It became
when we were before we did that push. How many do you think there were in the world? A couple dozen, maybe.
I think like 20 maybe, yeah, or
Yeah,
30.
it felt like about 20, and I remember. Oh,
I think it was already
Go ahead.
sizable.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I remember
was
it
gonna
being.
say, I think it was already like 50 or something.
Really?
And then
Okay.
it grew.
Oh, that's intimidating because I only thought there were like a few dozen.
I
I mean,
remember-
we're even spoiling things for you right now.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
like
we're
like
gonna wreck this for you.
I mean that more as like, that's a lot of work ahead.
Like,
Well, so
I remember there was like. Yeah, sorry, go on, Eric.
I was going to say, I remember when we all came together and he said, "Okay, guys, we're going to spend the next couple months or weeks or whatever." It's all a blur. But he said like we need to focus on. We call them environment puzzles, by the way. That's the term that we
Right,
use on the
sure.
team. Environment puzzles. So, and it was like, well, we need to add more of them. And we said, well, how many do you want? And he said, at least 100.
But yeah,
And I
yeah,
remember
and I
thinking,
think we were
like,
laughing. We're like, yeah,
Yeah.
right. We're not gonna get. And I think Eric is right. It was like maybe 30, because I remember we're like, we're gonna do like maybe 10 or 20, and we're gonna have enough to be a thing. But no way we thought it would be as rich as the panel puzzles.
That John wanted them all to say something different. We
Yes.
couldn't just be like, oh, there's a line over here, let's make that a puzzle. It
Like
had
it-
to be new in some way.
like it literally became every corner you turn, there's always something.
Yeah.
We're retiring.
And a lot of it had to do with playing off the theme of the areas as well. So like,
Yeah.
I was the big area that I was in charge of was the desert ruin area. And so reflectivity and specularity is a big theme in that area. And so I couldn't just go in and make a bunch of shadow-based puzzles there because it doesn't fit with the theme, right? I had to try to figure out a way to, how can we use reflectivity or specularity in a way? And it got a lot more difficult when you had to keep it sort of within the theme of the area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have the physical constraints as well of like, because it's situated in that area, you don't have opportunities for the like soft shadowing that you get from a forest because you're stripped out in the desert. Or like,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, or yeah, sorry.
I was going to like Jonathan. That was something I liked that he said, "Don't force a puzzle. Just try
Right.
to see how, like, look for something that with a little bit of work would actually become a puzzle. Like it's almost there, but in reality, this would be a lot of work. But you could kind of see how it would be a shape, almost like in the real world."
Yeah, it's it was I remember Mark Ten Bosch, the guy making that cool game Mega Kure, that 4D puzzle game was talking about the idea that we think of the world in 3D, but we as humans, our eyes perceive world two-dimensionally, like we only ever see a plane of something, and that was something really cool that I got out of those in the panels as an idea was the game feels in a lot of ways to be about the sort of interaction between 3D space and two-dimensional perception, or like between 3D and 2D, and how our eyes sort of perceive the world. And yeah, it's amazing how many opportunities there are to see that idea in different ways. You guys did a good job on that. It was impressive.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I distinctly remember walking around the island for those several days when he had tasked us with this, and it was just like you sort of squint your eyes and just look at things and try to figure out where you want to pull puzzles out of the world and then go rework something that you hadn't touched in 6 months. That was probably the hardest part. I don't know if you guys would agree. Like we would finish an area.
Yeah.
And it's more like, as an artist, you never do this in other projects. Like, you had to really think. Like, I even remember when we started to touch them, we were like, okay, Jonathan designed them, we just have to make them look pretty. But this became totally, now you're a designer, You're a designer, and then you're going to use your arts to design. And it was totally like, this is not circular enough. I don't see the end cap. Oh, you should tweak this. And you're like, man, we're doing design work now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that bleeding between disciplines is cool because I've heard both John and also his friend Chris Ecker sort of talking about this idea of how as a designer, understanding programming influences what you can conceive and understand of a situation, and these puzzles in The Witness definitely felt like the same thing, but for art, like to see the possibilities you needed to be an artist.
I think there's some truth to that.
Maybe.
I think to execute them, you need to be an artist mostly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know. Like I feel like to see certain opportunities, like being an artist, would like allow you to see things that maybe some of the programmers or John wouldn't have been to see.
Yeah. Like Jonathan, like I have to say, he was pretty good. Like,
oh yeah.
I think it was more, if there were 5 Jonathans in the team, maybe they could have done it, but there was only one, so he asked us, can you guys, because I don't know, like personally I would come with ideas and he was able to look at them and sometimes improve them immensely just by looking at it from a slightly different angle. And maybe it's because we're looking at the island for so long, I don't know. Because this would also happen talking with each other, where I would be stuck in something, I would, hey, Orsi, can you look at this? And she'd be like, why don't you try this? And I'm like, wow.
Oh, it was that for the whole project for me. Like the team dynamic for the art team was unlike any other project I ever worked on, and I was a little unsure of it at first because it just felt like Jonathan got a bunch of artists and put them in a room and said, "Go make a thing, figure it out yourselves." and it was like, how the hell is this going to work? But then a few months in, it was like, this is working. It was like we're actually collaborating.
Like truly collaborating, yeah.
For me, it was great because I had never worked with anybody like that. I was just out of school, so having a team, I wasn't confident in what I was doing, but every time we would talk, there would just be so many great ideas going around that it was very inspiring. I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool. Very cool. There's something I was going to ask about. There was another spoilery thing. I can't remember. I was on the tip of my tongue.
Oh.
I'm actually curious. When you first played the game, did you first play it after the retail release?
Yeah, so I played it very very shortly after it had come out. Like due to okay, this is embarrassing. So due to time zone differences, it came out like 2 a.m. Where I live in Australia.
Oh, that's right. You guys got it first.
No. It was 2 a.m. on Wednesday.
Oh, you got it last.
It would have been funny if it had come out on Tuesday, because Tuesday, the 26th of January, is a public holiday called Australia Day. And so it's like, oh, cool, The Witness is coming out on Australia Day. Anyway, I'd work at 7, and I was like, well, I really want to play some of it. So I got up at 4, like exercised for a bit while it was installing, and then played it for an hour before work. And I was like, like that didn't feel good health-wise, but it was fun to play that day.
I'm actually curious what your experience was playing the game for the first time. Specifically, when did you turn the corner into this game is bigger than what people think it is?
Well, so I had that been in amongst that discussion with friends where they were asking like, how on earth could this like game be like as expansive as Jonathan Blow claims that it is, given that the core conceit is that you're tracing line puzzles, and like really because I played Braid and had that experience with that, and played a lot of Spy Party and had the experience with that, and like knew of games like Go and such where have something that's seemingly simple explode into lots of possibilities. I was like, yeah,
Sure.
I was like, yeah, I'm sure there's lots of opportunities, panels. The thing I was curious about was I didn't know what the like other part of the game that he talked about was, and so that was a surprise. The idea of lines.
What was your first one like?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
what I
so-
want to know.
So the interesting thing is I don't remember because I saw a bunch of them, but I just didn't conceive them as being puzzles. I actually thought they were an extension of the idea of a lot of the statues. Oh, that's right. I wanted to ask about the statue. So go into that after this. But I thought they were just sort of other cute jokes in the same vein as, oh, this like twig framed up against this cloud looks like a tree, or the shadow of this statue that looks like he's crying to God is actually someone juggling, stuff like that. And so it wasn't until I'd actually like just finished the 11th area and I was like, well, guess I better go have a go at the mountain. That I was like, I've been seeing these everywhere, and I just went into interact mode, and then lights shot everywhere, and I was like, what the heck is going on? So I just sort of tabled that, thinking, okay, I'll come back to you after I do this other thing. And
So wow, you did all 11 lasers before you even traced your first.
yeah,
Wow.
Obelisk puzzle. But yeah, and like at first I was thinking, oh, they're probably just a few here and there, but then like seeing all these things that I'd seen before and realizing, oh, that's what that is, or like, oh, well, that couldn't possibly like complete because it gets cut off here, and then sort of realizing how machines in the world can allow you to continue a line, or complete one. I was like, oh wow, they're actually. And now hearing you guys say just how many there are, I'm like, okay, this is really interesting. I'm like trying to, because I've by this point been around the island for 30 hours, so like trying to conceive now of like how you could have different opportunities for that. Yeah, that's a head scratcher.
Yeah.
That'll be fun. But yeah, we should talk about those statues because they're interesting. So if you've seen, I mean, that's a tricky thing with the statues. I feel like there's going to be instances where people have seen tricks with the statues, or in environment art. that they know of, and other ones which they haven't. So I guess, like, look, if you're okay with us spoiling specific examples, listen on. If not, there's an annotation link you can click to skip. But they seemed very playful in an interesting sense in which they weren't like things that you solved. Instead, they were like opportunities for things to see. And I thought that was interesting. So where did that part of the game come about in the process? The idea of these like bits of art in the world.
That was actually one of the things that I also like. That was one of the things that I started out doing, is starting to think of interesting ways to put these strange things into the environment. And I don't know how much I can talk about that.
Well,
but,
no, so feel free to talk about any specific examples, because both I and the listeners are here with the assumption that things that we have seen, we'll get to talk about things that might be spoiled. That's okay.
When I just joined.
There she is.
Yes, hi.
There you go.
So there were a couple of statues the first time I played the game, and they weren't providing any purpose. They were just kind of there. But coming upon them was a very shocking experience, you know. So I was thinking, what can we do to make these have some sort of significance, some sort of like interest? And, you know, with the statues, it wasn't only the statues that had these kinds of interesting things about them, like the shadows.
Oh.
There was a lot of other things, like shadows doing their own independent image, or if you line up tree branches in a certain way, it forms a certain image. There's a lot of those in the game that I was actually hired just to design those in the beginning.
Huh.
And yeah, the statues kind of turned into a whole act of the game, starting out of that, where I concepted out a bunch of them, and we worked with John to refine their meaning and their kind of symbolism, and I don't want.
Yeah,
I think it cut off. I think what all she wanted to say, she doesn't want to spoil. There's a lot of things that lose their beauty if you talk too much about them. No, Orsi?
Yeah. And unfortunately, most of the things I worked on are exactly that.
You guys ought to give credit to Andreas.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So, Luis, you actually did a few statues, so you should talk about that.
So, like, I'm a character artist. That's my specialty, or at least it was 4 years ago. And that's why I was going to work in Spy Party, because it was tons of characters. So when I joined, I was super excited to do these statues. But as the world got more complex, it was like, it went like, I don't know, from 5, 10, 15 statues start to grow. So I made 2 of them. And I think it was, I made them mostly for us to figure out the technical side, how much detail we want, how they are supposed to look. And then we got the awesome Andrea Blasik, I don't know how you say his name, who's like
I think that's close.
he's like a natural sculptor. He sculpts with clay, but he's also very good with ZBrush, and it's amazing. Like, he made these, like, from all the art tests we did with character artists, his work was by far the best. Like,
Yeah, was the woman etched into the mountain, was that him?
yeah.
Yeah, that one was awesome. That was very impressive. I mean,
Yeah, like the statues have a naturalism that you don't see in games. Like, games, it's always like bulky, generic proportions. It doesn't feel like sculptures. It feels like power fantasies kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a very classical feel, which was very nice. But
yeah,
or I don't even know if classical is
the right word.
I think he's the closest one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
It was funny for me. Sorry. I was going to say it was. I'm gonna shut up now. Your mic's working, so I'm gonna shut up.
Oh, it was just a little.
Oh man, Orsi,
I'm,
you're like Morse code.
I'm really sorry about this.
All right, I'm jumping in. I was
Just
gonna
go.
say,
Aw.
that for me, like I said, I was on the project for quite some time, looking at the mock-ups that Orsi had made, which were basically just very, very simple, like poser models. They had the basic idea, but they had no detail whatsoever. They were just sort of featureless human figures. Um, and then it was several months later, or I guess every couple months, I would log in and just sort of see how things were going, in the game, since I had been in there every day working on it. And it was shocking to see the difference, because I saw it all at once. I didn't see the, like, oh, here's sort of the in progress sculptures, and I saw right from the rough stuff right to the final, and I was like, oh my god, these are a million times more successful than I ever thought they could be, and it all came down to just the skill of the sculptor. It
Yeah.
was so successful.
So it is kind of like the analogy that comes to mind is Spy Party, because the jump you sort of see is there's old art characters and there's new art characters.
Sure.
Actually I realized just now, Lewis, that it must be weird that like the Skype picture I've got is two of the Spy Party cast members. So it's weird that I have like, hey, this is the game that you could have worked on, and here's some of the art. Like, I hope that's
Yeah,
not awkward.
not at all. Like, and I'm actually super happy that I didn't work on Spy Party because this project grew into something much bigger. That for me personally, like I love game design. I've always loved game design, and I had a chance to be in this world more than I think, because Spy Party is smaller as a game, in terms of content.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's still that was something interesting actually. Being someone who's on the Spy Party forums a lot, sort of seeing different discussions about The Witness, and some people who liked it, and some people who didn't. And one of the interesting discussions was, for some people it was something that was very valuable to them, and some people it wasn't. And there was like one guy who was saying, oh, I like value Spy Party like much higher than The Witness, and I was like, oh wow, that's like, it was interesting to see this like contrast of, for some people this particular game is like more valuable, and some people this other thing is, and so it's interesting to hear those different sides of.
yeah. Like, so I would actually say, like, if you come from a big company, there's a lot of like work, like you have to specialize if you want to survive.
Yeah.
So I had that mentality a lot, where like if I go to Ubisoft, I cannot say I do a bit of everything, because you won't do anything then. So you have to be like the best character artist, or if you're an environment artist, you might have to specialize like in buildings, or even you're just a texture artist. So Spy Party, I always felt it was a good challenge to go deep into character design. And The Witness for me was a chance to go deep into making a game, because there's everything in The Witness. It's not just one focused thing.
Well, John,
And it's
sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, John Simino, the artist on Spy Party, did say that was one of the actually really nice things about working on Spy Party, was that he gets to keep switching between different modes of, like, now I'm modeling, now I'm animating, now I'm designing in environments, and so he did get that helpful like break from one style of work to another.
Yeah, and for me, I came to the project, having worked as a sort of, I would say, generalist environment artist, definitely environment art specialist, but I've always worked in a small company where you have to wear lots of hats and you're constantly doing lots of things. But even I was blown away by sort of the amount of trust and sort of like non-micromanagement that we were given on the project. And so even I was blown away by, like, okay, this is exactly what I want to be working on. But I came away with such an appreciation and understanding for the design side and the the sort of the bigger picture view of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Oh yeah. I definitely thought that I would be spending my life, at least the first few years of my life in the industry just modeling tiny barrels or something, but the fact that I got to an entire area of the game is just, it's unreal.
Wait until your next company, or you're gonna have the biggest surprise of your life.
There's plenty of 50-gallon drums to be modeled in the world.
Plenty more barrels in the sea. Yeah, well, speaking of which, I think Eric was mentioning a project before. What are like projects that you guys are working on now that you've finished up The Witness, like in your own time or with other people?
I'm going to answer that.
I was going to say, Luis, jump in. You got the best answer.
So for the last 2 years, I've been working on my free time on a game called 12 Minutes. It's like a time loop game on a prototype. And it's been on PAX, at Indicate. It's got some awards. It's got good press.
Oh, cool.
And I'm, if all goes well, I would like to work on it full time and make it happen. So that's my thing. Yeah, if not, I'll continue working with Jonathan on whatever he does next.
That's nice. What's the premise of 12 Minutes?
It's funny to be saying this here. It's a time loop game. So it's like Groundhog Day. You come home from work, you're having dinner with your wife, and a cop shows up. He beats you up, you pass out, and you go back to the start of the day. And you have to use the knowledge of what you know it's going to happen to try to change the outcome and break the loop. And it all happens in an apartment. It's all in real time, and the loop is 12 minutes.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, 12 minutes game. Yeah, check it. If you write 12 minutes game, you get the link on Google. And
it's pretty cool too.
Wow, very cool.
I think it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Luis taught himself how to program.
Whoa!
Yeah, I learned to program to. Yeah, so that's the thing. Like I had this idea for ages, and I always believed, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a programmer and get a lot of people to help. And Jonathan, Mark Ten Boch, Danielle, Chris Ecker, they were like, you cannot do a game if you don't know how to program. It's like being an artist without knowing how to draw, And once that clicked, and like I remember seeing Jonathan designing some of the, like you finished the game, right? Or you didn't?
Yes.
Like I remember the light bridges. Like I remember he went to the office or he went to the site, he programmed, and the next day he showed it to us. And it was amazing. Like in a big studio, you'd have a designer who'd write a document about this, show it to the producer, assign it to a programmer. The guy would program the tools, back to the designer, implement, complain they don't work. And it would take like 3 months to get a quarter of what that puzzle is supposed to be. And here you have a person iterating super fast and being everything at once. Like it makes so much sense. Like there's no way you can make a game if you don't know how to program. A good game, at least. I mean, it must be really hard. Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah. What about you, Eric or Orsi? Are there like side projects?
I'll jump in here. So after my time on The Witness, the whole time it was like, oh, we've only got 6 months left. And so at some point during the project, I thought to myself, like, oh, crap, if we've only got 6 months left, I'm not sure, what's next. And so I was still in contact with my people at Cyan, the Mist and Riven folks, and we decided to try to do a Kickstarter for a new game, and we did that a couple years back now. And it's successfully funded, and I let Jonathan know, way ahead of time, and I'll finish out my work on the project, and there's plenty of time left. And that 6 months, I guess, ended up being about two years. I'm trying to remember how long it was. I think it was an extra 2 years till you guys shipped. But and so it wasn't that I was fleeing the project. It was just like, oh God, we're not done yet. But this other thing is happening, and I'm going to go art direct this other game. And so
you were working on both?
Oh, go ahead.
You were doing both at once?
No. I was. We did the Kickstarter, and then I continued working on The Witness for about 7 months.
Oh, okay.
After we did the Kickstarter. Meanwhile, the rest of the team, like, they started doing game design work and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so eventually, I transitioned from The Witness to working on what I'm still currently working on, which is a game called Abduction with an O, and it is a spiritual successor to Mist and Riven, sort of an environmental puzzle game, story based, very much sort of in the school of the old Mist and Riven style games. Definitely a different breed from The Witness, but we're in the sort of the final crunch right now. We'll be showing the game at GDC this year and kind of trying to land the bird, so to speak. But that's been a whole different sort of experience because it's we're on a definite timetable as opposed to The Witness, where it was kind of like work on it until it's done. And it went for 7 years. Yeah, this is more, okay, we're crunching to get this done in time. So. But it's definitely a big transition back to this sort of game development. So.
Yeah, and what about you, Orsi? Do you have any projects that you've been working on since or during The Witness?
I've been pretty much all Tekla all the time. So I was working on The Witness, nights, weekends, everything. A little bit less towards the end because I got very tired. And then once we were done, it was all about bug fixing and now kind of transitioning into new ideas and such. So I haven't actually had a lot of side projects going on. I do like short term, like self in my free time, but I'm not doing anything crazy or big like these guys.
Oh, okay. So that's more like stuff to train yourself to like within your own discipline to like exercise different art things.
Yeah, it's actually less about training and more about doing the kinds of things that I wouldn't be able to do for, like, I really like to do character painting, but I would never really do it for video games because I don't know, I have a very specific thing that, I like to do and that very rarely gets used, so.
Cool. Yeah,
Thanks.
nice. You mentioning before how long you were spending towards the end of development working on the game. Like, did you guys towards the end find yourselves in the more traditional game development thing of having a crunch?
Not really. I think it was more my choice of just.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
like, you guys don't know what crunch is. I don't want to hear it.
Like, we crunched maybe 3 days in 4 years, maybe 4 days.
What?
Yeah.
That's
No,
good.
that
It was more
back
than that.
I don't like. There was
when the first trailer had to come out.
And that was because our office was in Berkeley, so we had 1 hour commute to go back and forth, I think. And that was like a week, I think. It wasn't. It was very soft crunch, like compare, like it's like instead of leaving at 6, you leave at 9. You're not leaving at midnight for. We never worked weekends. I mean, maybe a couple of them, but it was very relaxed. Like I think it's offensive to people who crunch to say that we crunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Witness development was, I wouldn't call it like relaxed in the sense that, people are goofing off or anything, because it was definitely focused effort, but it was a healthy sort of focus.
Yeah. Like mentally it was exhausting, like because we had to be so focused when we were working that revising the same things over and over, it got to a point that it was hard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That does feel something that sort of resonates in the game as well, is that it requires a lot of attention and it's kind of exhaustive in that way, but it's never in a way where it's like being confronting or intense. It's never like forcing you to like put in a lot of effort or be stressed. But at the same time, it feels like there is opportunity to like invest a lot of yourself into it if you want to.
Oh yeah, it's never abusive, but it requires a lot of mental energy, and that's exactly what developing it was like.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah, so that's all the stuff that I wanted to talk about. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to bring up or chat about?
It's a great game. Best game I have worked on.
You should buy it if you can.
No, no, like I mean, honestly, like so something that like when the game was out, I before there were scores or anything, like it's the best game I've worked on, and I really like the outcome. Like I think it's a good game, no matter how people will judge it. And I never had that feeling before in other games I worked on. Like I think it's a very well done game.
I agree.
And it's a
I
little
have people.
intimidating to
Go ahead.
have worked on it. Yeah, it's just a little intimidating to have worked on it as the first project I ever worked on because it ended up being so amazing that I'm just hoping I can measure up for the next one.
I had people asking me, what's your favorite game this year? And before, this was like a year before the game had come out. I said, like, this is going to sound really completely facetious and like just self-aggrandizing, but like my favorite game is The Witness.
Best rocks ever.
Yeah.
But like I remember like Manhunt 2 came out, and I was like, I don't think it's very good, and people will be offended on the team, like how come? And because this game is really good. Like it's so good. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad that the
Definitely
public
not for
seems to
everybody,
like it
for
too.
sure.
Yeah,
Sorry?
but I mean the reception seems to have been fairly good.
Yeah.
It's of it, but if it's not the kind of game that you are looking for, it could get really annoying.
Yeah, well,
Sure. Yeah.
I mean
It's-
Oh, sorry, Lewis, you go.
Oh no. Like go ahead.
Well, that was something I found very interesting was like the Witness I enjoyed a lot and really love, and a lot of the sort of themes and ideas of it really spoke to me. But it was also interesting sort of reading about the opinions of people who didn't like it or offended by it, and sort of interesting to like understand how they came at it from a different view and saw things differently. So but also I kind of realized that if it had included the things or been about the things that they valued or thought that it should have had, then I would have enjoyed it less. And so it feels definitely like what makes it something that certain people will love are the things that make other people not like it. So
Yeah,
I don't think it's divisive, but it definitely feels like it's an acquired taste. And I love
I
it
think
for that.
I think it's more like I remember, like for example, we got a lot of people complaining in the Symmetry Island that the lines were disappearing and it was a bug. Like we would get on the forums, there's a bug, the lines are not showing up when you're tracing the panels, and I think that reflects the gamers nowadays. They don't expect this level of quality in terms of design, where like they don't trust the designer. They're like, this is clearly broken. They don't even think maybe this is on purpose. And I think maybe in 10 years, when more games are like this, people will be like you don't go into the game expecting a certain level of quality this high. You expect it to be, I'm bored. I shouldn't be bored, or I don't understand. Where's my hint system coming up, Yeah.
Sorry, or
Sorry?
yep, no,
Am
sorry.
I cutting
Sorry.
off again?
No, you're good. Seize it.
Games lately, they very much rely on story or some sort of reward just to string the player along the gameplay, where to the point where sometimes players are just like, fine, I'll solve this horribly annoying puzzle just so I can see the next cutscene because I'm really interested in finishing the story. And a lot of thinking about the puzzles where they just saw it as a means to an end, but then that end was never there in our game. Like, just the journey itself was the point. And that can probably turn a lot of people off, but it's a different kind of personality who enjoys doing these challenges for the sake of doing the challenges as opposed to for a reward or
Yeah. They're there for the sake of seeing these different ideas and seeing the world rather than being there to make you feel good or string along a story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was oh no, I've lost it. Never mind. No, I think I was going to say. Oh yeah, that's it. So regardless of like where you fall down, like whether what the witness has is something you like or not, one thing that definitely can't be denied is that it's clear that John and you guys cared very much about the puzzles. Like they clearly are presented there as something that is that has its own worth, rather than the puzzles needing to be there to justify something else. Like the puzzles feel confident in that they are there for their own sake. They like don't need to excuse themselves for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's 100%
and even that
true.
is kind of interesting because a lot of people interpret it as the island is indifferent to their existence.
Hmm.
Which is very much, not true. Everything we did in the game was, to help the player, but it was more to help the player help themselves.
Yeah.
Trying to spoon feed them what they're supposed to do next. And I think that people have seen that, not have that like helpline there all the time or a hint system or something. But it actually was us trying to really respect the player and give them the way to figure everything out themselves.
Yeah, I can attest to a practical example of that where this is a spoiler for the conceit of the desert puzzles. So for the I think it was like 10 minutes. I couldn't grasp what the idea of the first desert panel was. And so it wasn't until I sort of walked away from it and then came back to it later, and was just sort of looking at the architecture of the shiny surfaces on the front, like sun-facing part, that I like saw how the sun could be caught in the object, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And seeing how the sun like moved as you move around it, and that gave me the spark to. But like, it's interesting because it is not a tutorial. It's instead just there something that is a fact about the world, but it's explicitly put there as an idea that you try and apply to one of the panels.
Right.
Yeah, and we actually put a lot of these different kinds of things to help. Like, I actually had a little visual surprise kind of thing near that area, and a lot of people have said, oh, I didn't even know what to do in that place until I saw that little flower thing. And suddenly I like realized, what I was supposed to do. And like, there's so many clues in the environment in all the specific areas. And we tried to keep it so very focused, just so that, if you really look at what's going on around you, you can kind of figure it out.
Yeah, did you put that little flower in the fireplace in one of the old buildings in the like town square?
I placed all of the little flowers.
You placed all the little flowers. Aha! I was like, these all feel intentionally placed, and I wonder who did that.
Just today on Reddit, somebody was trying to get her to explain what those were all about, and she refused.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you hang out with John too much, it's like, nope, I refuse to answer any. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much for taking part. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, thank you.
It was fun, yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Sorry for cutting out all the time.
No, I'm sorry. It's cool. It's I feel like we worked well around. Is there anything that any of you wanted to say in closing before we stop the recording?
No, just thanks for doing the interview. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
I guess
I think Orsi was.
Okay, Orsi gets to repeat hers.
I said it's been nice. Thank you.